We are having technical difficulties, but don't you worry. In a few minutes, Aaron and all his digital and technology wizardry is going to make this happen. Part-time wizard, part-time DP, part-time Kauai Comic Con director, part-time Blood of the Samurai,
cat lover,
dog lover, lover of all humans and people, just basically a philanthropist and should get an award. Warrior, poet. What other adjectives could we use to describe our fearless director of Kauai Comic Con? The lightsaber screwdriver did not save the day. So sad. Great effort by Aaron and Ling. Thanks for the hustle, guys. Thanks for the hustle.
Hi, welcome to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Thanks for joining the conversation. Live from Kauai Comic Con, I had the pleasure of conversing with Moana McAdams, a passionate advocate for Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander stories and representation. Moana's dedication to preserving and promoting the rich cultural heritage of these communities is truly inspiring. We delved into the importance of authentic representation in media, the challenges faced by Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander communities, and the beauty of their traditions and stories. Moana's insights shed light on the ongoing efforts to ensure that these vibrant cultures are accurately and respectfully portrayed. Her work not only honors the past, but also paves the way for future generations to embrace and celebrate their heritage. Tune in to this enlightening episode to learn more about the significance of these stories and the impact of representation in creating a more inclusive world. I apologize for any technical difficulties and the lively Comic-Con background noise as we were recording live from the panel room. These sounds add a genuine charm, making you feel like you're right here at the convention with us. We share plenty of laughs, but the conversation is truly important, so be sure to tune in. I've been enjoying these conversations and hope you have too. If you have, please rate my podcast on your platform of choice and share it with others. If you would like to support with a donation to help keep this podcast going and support the work I do, you can become a patron of the show by visiting my website or patreon.com/SifuMimiChan. For comments or suggestions, reach out on social media at SifuMimiChan. Now, on with the show.
Hello! Welcome to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. We are here in Kauai live at Kauai Comic Con. Thousands of people in the crowd. My special guest today is Moana McAdams, who is here to talk a lot about Hawaiian culture. We were talking off air already about diversity and inclusion, but also originally from Kauai, is that correct?
Yes, originally from Kauai, Wailua Homesteads, Kapa'a High School, and I'm really excited to be here at Comic-Con. It's a little bit of a, going full circle, which is awesome, and our community is the best, so it's always good to be home.
Love it, love it. And okay, I have to say, your name is Moana. I'm sure it's not the first time you've heard this. Like, oh, your name is Moana, just like Disney's Moana?
Yes, just like her. But yeah, so I get this question a lot. Like, you mean like Disney Moana? Yes. But were you named after her? Like,
Yes, but she's a little older than me.
That's right, she's my older sister.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is there actually, because I know that you know a lot about genealogy and you did a podcast on names and things. Is there a meaning behind the name Moana as well? Or is there anything significant why it's Disney? Do you know why Disney chose the name Moana? Or
I don't know why they chose it, but Moana is actually, I think what they were trying to do with Moana is encapsulate a lot of the different Pacific Islander cultures, and Moana is a name that is common across those. The meaning of Moana itself, at a very surface level, is ocean, but in Hawaiian culture, the words have nuance to it. So Moana is actually like the depths of the ocean. And for those of you who don't know, like Pacific Islander cultures, obviously very oceanic focused cultures, and very strong navigators throughout our history, and the ocean is what actually unites us. So to me, that's what makes it important.
Yeah, no, thank you. Actually, even many of our audience members and myself included I think that is the problem. We don't get to learn about Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander stories. We don't get to learn about any of these stories growing up, and that's why I worked on, inclusion in our history in schools. But I think beyond that, the work you're doing, especially to a broader audience, like comic books and storytelling and children's books, it's so important because these stories will be lost. And I know that you were talking earlier about Disney and working on Lilo and Stitch as a comic writer and trying to tell authentic stories. Are there certain stories that you've come across in your research that you feel like, I wish I had known this growing up, and that is like one that you're compelled to usually tell?
I would say like just about every Pacific Islander story is fascinating. So in my research, I read a lot of historical books written by Hawaiian authors, also some authors that come from outside of our community. We hear the Maui story, and that was what was featured in the Moana film. But there are so many depths of different portrayals of Maui. But he isn't, the only superhero, right? Like in Hawaii, we have Kanaloa, which is the ocean god. We have Kane, Lono. And so what I try to put into my books are taking things that are like rooted in culture, but trying to make it a spin on it that makes it more modern so that the kids, the younger generation now, can relate to it in a way. Because a lot of the fandoms that I think are out there, there are cultural elements into it that it's just not as apparent to the reader.
Yeah, and I've noticed, especially since I've been working so hard on that AAPI history inclusion, AAPI NH, all of it, right? It's especially Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander communities, I think even more so, are excluded, and there's a lot of misrepresentation. Do you know or why you think that might be? Because I do find that even in my research, it's like you can find a little bit about Asian American history, especially East Asian, maybe even some Southeast Asian, but I think especially that Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander element, we really find that missing and then misunderstood and misrepresented.
Yeah.
Is there a reason you think that's the case?
Well, so I think there's many reasons for this. A lot of it just wasn't taught in school. I mean, I know when I was a kid, even living in Hawaii, right, it wasn't a part of the curriculum. A lot of our history subjects, like the classroom, it was all American history. I definitely didn't see a whole ton of Hawaiian history at the time. We didn't have the immersion schools that we have now that are giving that exposure for our kids. And so part of the big reason with my stories and anything that I work on is trying to bring that authenticity into the story to help our children feel like they are seen, and not just on the surface, but the stories that are being told, things that they can relate to, in their childhood, in their families, the dynamics, all of those types of things. And then, of course, the history piece is super important. I think Pacific Islanders, they're kind of a minority within a minority because there are such diverse cultures within the Pacific itself. And then when you're in other settings where folks don't even, because if it's not taught in Hawaii, I'm sure it's not being taught in the continent, right?
It's not.
And so part of what I like to do with my stories is kind of be a part of the solution to that problem, giving our perspective of what we feel like is important to us as a community, and then also hopefully inspiring the next generation or even other writers who have thought about, I don't see myself in a story. I would like to, share that more. And just pretty much show that there are examples of people who have done it. I never thought I would be a writer. I actually didn't start writing until probably 6 years ago. Didn't have any formal training, none of that. I've just kind of been learning, talking to others in the community, learning kind of the business and process of it, but then keeping my work focused on my community because that's what's important to me.
Yeah, I love that so much. I can't emphasize how much and how often I've heard kids and adults, because of course, Mulan was a long time ago now, come up to me and say, wow, it was so amazing to see a character that looked like me, or that ate the food I ate or had that same feeling. And I can't imagine, just even with Lilo and Stitch and Moana, how many people have said, wow, what a breath of fresh air, and how much of a relief it was to feel a connection, but also to be seen and to feel represented. And even if it's not 100% accurate, we'll take it, right? We'll take something. Something is better than nothing, and it's a starting point.
Definitely.
And I think for us, we really are pushing for that starting point and to just build on top of that. Now, you also host the Moana Nui podcast, and I believe, I'm going to guess, what prompted you was to continue these stories and everything. And I know as a podcast host, I started after 2016, so it's been a while, but I've learned a lot about myself personally as a podcast host. What have you learned about yourself hosting a podcast?
Oh man. So when I first started my podcast, like, I'm not one who likes to be the center of attention. So like, before I started my podcast, sitting in front of you guys right now, my heart would be going like this. Like, and I'm still not a huge fan of being in front of people, but it's just part of the business. It's part of, if you want your stories to be told, you have to get up in front of people, right? And so the podcast is great though. We actually started it just after COVID. We couldn't go to cons anymore. Everybody was isolated, right? But for me, like my husband and I, we self-publish our own series, The Wild Card Chronicles. And so we're a part of the independent comic community, which, in Comic Cons, we don't often get featured, but we wanted people to better understand the creators behind the stories, what drives them to create, why did they create, and their experiences, and help fans get to know them better as people and why their stories are awesome. So we started it as like features for small publishers or small creators, and then it kind of grew. Like, we now have multiple segments. We go to different Comic Cons, Dragon Con in Atlanta. We're headed to San Diego in July. So we go all over the place. I have teams that help, and just like this Comic Con, you can't do it by yourself. It's all about community. Like, everything in my work is about the community and how we can help each other to like make our dreams come true, whatever that might be. Like, I know we talked about Mulan earlier, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because she was a character, and I was like, oh my gosh, it was like close. Like, she wasn't Hawaiian, but she definitely wasn't the typical blonde hair, fair skin, princess.
100%.
So, a podcast really gives you an opportunity to connect with people, build relationships. A lot of the opportunities that I have now is through my podcast and the people that I've met. Ming was on my show, like Aaron, he's brought me into this space. So I'm really grateful for all of the different folks here.
Well, I know why you're nervous. I mean, there's thousands of people here at Kauai Comic Con, and so obviously the nerves can be going. But honestly, I was talking earlier, and I really wasn't kidding. Like, I prefer cons where I am up with the community, being able to speak one-on-one. Like, San Diego's great. It is a mess, but I much prefer coming to Kauai any day over San Diego Comic Con. And that is, I am not lying.
For sure.
It's just I just really love the community here. Same. And when Aaron actually told me he was starting a Comic Con in Kauai, I said, amazing. And he said, well, our community never gets a Comic Con here. They don't get to share in the culture. Some of our kids and families can't afford to island hop to even the other islands that are so close by. And I thought it was such a noble thing. We were teasing Aaron earlier about all the things and how amazing. But in all honesty, like, just kudos and thank you so much to Aaron for bringing this here, because it allows not only your community to come together, but for outsiders to come in and visit and also see how wonderful and amazing the community here is. So I'm grateful to be here as well, and just so happy that we have this opportunity.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned, that Kauai usually doesn't get to experience these things. Even with my children's book series, The Adventures of Nakoa and Nohea, I decided to write those and base it here in Kauai, because a lot of our cultural books, Pacific Islander books, Native Hawaiian books, typically focus on Oahu and Maui and the Big Island, and Kauai doesn't get a lot of love. But what I wanted to do, like, I'm from Kauai, I'm going to represent my home, and I'm proud to do that, because, we know a lot about Kamehameha and, those chiefly lines, but I think what some people forget is that Kauai is the island that was never conquered. that had to be done through negotiation. So like how strong was our island at the time? And the first Hawaiian settlers actually came to Kauai, and those lineages were like seen as, they were actually sought after by the chiefs of the other islands. In order to strengthen their communities, they had to come to Kauai. So a lot of those things is what like further inspires me in my work.
Thank you so much. I'm getting a history lesson today. This is exactly what I wanted. On my podcast, I'm very selfish. I only interview people I want to learn from and who are fascinating, so I really get all the benefit, and our audience as well. But thank you for sharing that. I actually had no idea. That was fascinating to me. It's funny because Aaron has been to a lot of the cons that I've been at, and he always tells people, oh, I'm from Kauai. And when they've heard of it, he's shocked because he goes, oh, we're always kind of forgotten and a smaller island. And it made me so like heartbroken to hear that, because I had no idea that was the dynamic, because I know him and I knew this is where he was from. I never understood, but it makes sense that a lot of the bigger islands get a lot more of the love, a lot more of the cons, a lot more of the, so even like you said earlier with the Pacific Islanders, like, kind of within a community, even within the Hawaiian communities, you have kind of a hierarchy of either being forgotten or underrepresented. And so I think it's so important. So we love that you are helping, correct that. So thank you so much. I want to talk about really quickly also on the podcast lately, I saw that you were hosting so many things on lineage and, like I said, genealogy earlier and name origins. I've always found that fascinating, and I will not try to pronounce any of the Hawaiian things that I see and read. There's a lot of apostrophes, and I just never want to butcher anything, but I find it fascinating because I think, again, it's something that I don't know, like just by polling, maybe generationally, but how many people maintain the language and the art, there's just so much to it. Like as generations goes on, does that die out? And so what have you discovered as you've been having these podcasts and talking and kind of going deeper into that lineage and name origins and, that whole cultural dynamic?
Oh my gosh. So, you live in Hawaii, you know how complicated our family dynamics can get, like who's related to who and what family and, all of that. So, Moku Auhau is our name for genealogy. I'm not the expert, which is why I love the podcast, because I get to bring experts on so I can learn and so other people can learn. But so like a lot of the different chiefly lines, they intersected, and it's so hard to keep track because we have long names too. And I'm like, okay. And some of them they might be like who's the one up here? Kamei Ilihiva, and then there's number 1, and then there's number 2 and number 3, but they're not necessarily all in the same. You wouldn't think it was like mom, daughter, granddaughter. Sometimes it's like mom and then cousin of a cousin, and so it gets confusing very, very quickly. But genealogy is definitely important in knowing your roots. For myself, I enjoy it. I do it for my family because I want to know who our ancestors are. It's important for us to know this. And as I was doing my research, I discovered that like my, I would say seven generations before me, they were actually part of the advisors to King Kauai. Was within Hawaiian government, and he did a lot of the land titles, and his name is all over the place. So it's very interesting to know, because like I happen to work within government now, and just seeing the connections, like, oh, this is why I am the way I am. I became a leader because my ancestors were leaders. Yeah. And how do I translate this back now into the current community and help to continue to build upon that legacy? Yeah.
Wow, thank you so much for doing that. That's amazing. I'm also here, so obviously any excuse to come to Hawaii I will take, but it was really great that Aaron invited us back, and we're really happy to be here. And like I said, this is my favorite island, not just because it's the only island I've been to, but also because of the family and everyone that I've met. I just have such a connection. But I was also very excited because I'm jumping over from this island on Monday, and I'm going to Maui.
Okay.
And I spoke with a really lovely podcast guest last year, Ronald Sombrano, who is one of the people who lost their home in the Lahaina fire.
Yes.
And I had a really amazing conversation with him. He was so open and willing to share his story, and I was just heartbroken. And I'm in Florida, so we're on the news a lot for really not good
not fun
things.
reasons.
I'm sorry on behalf of all of Florida, but but what I'm frustrated about is the news media cycle constantly doesn't cover, I think, what's important. The media doesn't show what we really should be learning about or hearing about. And I don't think I've heard about the fires since last year, right? And I know from speaking with community members there that it is very much still a disaster. There's been no progress made. It's been problematic. So I was really grateful that I had the opportunity to, of course, come here and do all the fun things. But I'll be going on Monday to volunteer with the community. I'm doing like a Taiji wellness mental health workshop with our community there and some of the special needs community that we connected with. So I was really grateful and honored to be able to go out there and just share whatever I can and be whatever support, because I also am going to podcast again with Ronald, because people forget. Unfortunately, people forget. You all live so close, so I'm sure you're a little more connected, but it's so often people forget. And I saw on your website you had so much listed about supporting and local businesses and things like that. But what can you share about the fact that the aftermath of what's happened, even just for Hawaii as a whole, because even if you're not on Maui, it's affected everyone. Everyone feels or knows somebody that had lost.
Yeah, so I mean, I have family on Maui who were impacted by the fires. Job loss. It's compounding challenges that the community already faces today. But even though being away from that family, we worked with a nonprofit who was boots on the ground in Maui. A lot of the initial aid that went there wasn't the ones that you would think, right? Like FEMA and Red Cross, they were there, but the aid was slow to come in.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it came from Molokai. So what I was doing, because I live on the continent now, I was trying to raise money from the different businesses that I know and have relationships with. So we were able to raise money to bring in MacBooks and things that we Wakamana had, like mental health care workers, kind of like what you're doing, working within the community, but equipping them to be able to go in, communicate. We also donated books from, our children's book series. And then we've been working with some of the other Native Hawaiian businesses on the continent to help. That's really what I saw during that time, is no matter where we were, the community was trying to do whatever was in their power. We were also working with a halau, our hula group in Arizona, and they were raising funds to purchase supplies. And a lot of the challenges were like logistically. So, initially we were trying to send goods in, but then they were being held up for, don't even know why they were being held up. So we ended up just raising money and putting it into the community groups that we know were on the ground, Maui Medics, and I'm blanking on the other one right now. But the groups that we knew were tangibly helping.
Right.
The families were, you could see the immediate impact.
Yes.
And it's really important in those vulnerable situations, because it's really easy for those people to get taken advantage of. And people just do things just to exploit, quite frankly. But being a part of the community is really helpful, because when you are from a small knit community, it's hard to trust the intentions of people, regardless of like how it could be a totally good intention, but sometimes it turns out not that way. And so, especially when you're talking about the Hawaiian community who has been exploited for a while, building trust and having that with the community is huge.
Yeah, and it's just unfortunate that when there is tragedy, there are people that take advantage, and then we just have to hope for the best, but that there are protective organizations in place that can help. And so I'm going to definitely list that on the website as well, some of your links that people who want to be able to help. When I was in Florida, we were like, who do we send funds to? What do we do? Because nothing against the bigger orgs. We want to make sure that the help is going directly to those in need. And it's really hard to know, right? And even in Hawaii, I'm sure people were trying to connect with family and ask them directly, because you can't really go off what, like the news list places to help out. You can't go off of that, because you just want to make sure it's happening in the most direct way as possible and most impacting way. So unfortunately, there is still so many issues that are happening. So I will be, finding out on Monday and following up and hopefully share more of the stories that are happening, because this is just like what you and I have been talking about this whole time. If we don't share our stories, our history is not preserved. If we don't learn from history, we make the same mistakes. And we just see it happening all around the country. But, to kind of wrap up, maybe on a happier note, go back to Lilo instead. But I didn't want this to be a downer. But it's serious, right? These things are serious. And unfortunately, history is also not always pretty.
Yep.
It's not always the shiny moments and the happy moments. My husband and I talk about history a lot and listen to a lot of podcasts. And history is usually told by the victors and the winners, and that's not always the most accurate portrayal. But is there anything else that you feel our listeners, because we have our wonderful live audience, but we also have podcast listeners that honestly know nothing about Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander history or culture. Is there one thing that you would like our listeners to take away from the conversation?
Oh man, I guess I would just say
many things. Share it all.
That aloha is two-sided, right? There's the embracing thing, and then there's the protecting thing. And as a community, it's important for each of us to understand our role, and to not just be all about an individualistic person. I kind of see it both sides because I live in and outside of Hawaii. But aloha is a huge part of our culture, and we should definitely continue to do that. By the same token, you have a lot of value that you bring to the world. If there's a story that you want to tell, embrace it. Seek out others. Come talk to me. If there are things that you would like to do, if you have interest and you need some tips, I can connect you. If I don't know folks, if I'm not the one who has the answers, I'll do my best to connect you to people who can help you out, however that might look like for you. My ultimate goal really is to bring more people who look like me, who come out of our underrepresented communities, and to have seats at tables to influence this storytelling and bring more authenticity into it.
Thank you so much. All right, thank you so much to Moana McAdams again and Kauai Comic Con. Thank you for hosting this amazing event. We were actually, I think, the last panel of the day.
Yep.
So we are closing out strong here on the Sifu Mimi Chan podcast. Thanks to our amazing live studio audience. All right, everybody, I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you so much, Moana.
Thank you.
Such an honor and pleasure.
Likewise.
And we'll see you all next year. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to The Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Please subscribe and rate my podcast on your platform of choice and leave a review. You can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/SifuMimiChan to help keep this podcast going. Follow me and interact on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Instagram or Facebook.